The moment the front door clicked shut, my world seemed to break apart. I stood in my sister's living room, listening as the taxi drove away from the curb. Brooke and Jared were gone, heading off on their Caribbean cruise, 5 days of sunshine and cocktails, while I stayed behind to watch their daughter. I turned with a smile, ready to ask Nola what she wanted to do first. Maybe we could bake something, watch a movie, or read together like we usually did. But Nola wasn't reaching for her iPad. She wasn't typing a message for her text-to-speech app. She was just standing there, staring at me, with an intensity I had never seen in her 8 years. Then my niece, the child I believed had been mute since she was a toddler, opened her mouth. "Auntie, don't drink the tea Mom made. She planned something bad." Her voice was clear and steady, as if she had been speaking all her life. My blood felt like it turned to ice. I need to rewind about 6 hours so you understand how I got to that moment. How I ended up in my sister's house, realizing that everything I thought I knew about my family was carefully constructed fiction. My name is Lisa Rains. I'm 32 years old, and I work as an accountant at a mid-sized firm in Columbus, Ohio. Not exactly thrilling. While others dream about travel or romance, I dream about balanced spreadsheets. My therapist says I use numbers to feel in control, and she's probably right. That morning started out normally. Saturday coffee, a quiet apartment. I was enjoying the calm when my phone rang. It was Brooke, my older sister. There are 6 years between us, though sometimes it feels like far more. Her voice was overly sweet, which should have warned me. Brooke only sounded like that when she wanted something. She told me she and Jared had booked a last-minute anniversary cruise, 5 days in the Caribbean, and needed someone to watch Nola. I said yes immediately, because that's what I always did. I truly loved spending time with my niece. Even though communicating through an iPad could be tiring, there was something special about her. She had observant eyes that seemed to take everything in. When I read to her, she'd lean against me, as if my voice made her feel safe. Brooke had always said Nola was born with a rare neurological condition that affected her ability to speak. The doctors noticed it when she was about 3, and Brooke claimed nothing could be done. I never questioned it. She was my sister. She was Nola's mother. Why would I doubt her? I also wasn't around much during Nola's early years. I'd moved to Chicago for work right after she was born and only visited occasionally. By the time Nola was 3, she was already silent, and Brooke's explanation was firmly in place. I moved back to Ohio 2 years ago when our mother became sick with cancer. I wanted to be closer and help however I could. During that time, I spent more time with Nola, reading to her, bringing her books, simply being there. Even without words, we built a genuine bond. Our father, Harold, had died a few years earlier from heart disease. He was quiet and dependable, the kind of person who fixed things without complaint. When he died, it felt like our family lost its stability. When Mom passed 14 months ago, she left behind a trust of about $1.2 million, her and Dad's life savings and insurance. The rules were clear. Brooke and I both had to approve major withdrawals. Mom also left me the family home, since Brooke already owned property. At the time, it seemed fair. Now, I wonder if Mom knew more than I did. That Saturday around noon, I drove to Brooke's house. It was immaculate with a large lawn, the kind of place that looks staged for a magazine. Brooke greeted me with a hug, which was unusual. She thanked me repeatedly, looking flawless as always, with her luggage ready by the door. Jared was loading bags into the taxi and barely acknowledged me. He looked nervous, but he always did, so I ignored it. Brooke gave me a detailed walkthrough of the house, then opened the fridge and handed me a large thermos with a yellow lid. She said she'd made herbal tea for stress and insisted I looked worn out. Something about her tone felt off, too forceful, but I smiled and thanked her, as I always did. Brooke had a habit of offering solutions I never asked for. The taxi honked. She hugged me again, twice in one day, which was strange, and then they left. I watched the car disappear, closed the door, and turned around to see Nola standing there, looking at me like she was about to deliver terrible news. "Auntie, don't drink the tea Mom made. She planned something bad." I froze. The thermos felt heavy in my hands. My niece, who I believed couldn't speak, had just warned me that my own sister intended to harm me. I set the thermos down carefully and knelt in front of Nola. My hands were shaking. I asked her if she could really talk. She nodded, frightened but determined. She told me she always could, but her mother made her stop. I felt dizzy. When I asked what she meant, Nola began explaining the truth. She wasn't born mute. There was no neurological condition. Brooke had been lying for years. Nola spoke normally as a toddler, learning words, singing, asking questions. One afternoon, she overheard Brooke on the phone talking about money and saying my name, calling me stupid, saying I'd be out of the picture. Nola didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. The next day, Nola asked her mother what out of the picture meant. Brooke reacted with anger, grabbing her too hard and threatening her. She told Nola that if she ever spoke again, something terrible would happen to me. She said Nola's voice was dangerous and that staying silent was the only way to protect her aunt. Nola loved me. So at 3 years old, she chose silence. She gave up her voice to keep me safe. Sitting on the kitchen floor, listening to her explain this, I realized the depth of what my sister had done. Brooke took her to doctors, collected a diagnosis of selective mutism, and told everyone a different story. She built an image of a devoted mother to a special needs child. I had no reason to doubt her. As I looked around the room, my eyes landed on a plaque praising Brooke as Mother of the Year. In that moment, it felt meaningless. I asked Nola gently what else she had seen. It turned out that by staying silent, Nola had learned how easily adults forgot she was even there. They spoke openly around her, assuming she either couldn't understand or couldn't tell anyone even if she did. Nola noticed everything. She saw her mother practicing my signature again and again on scrap paper until it nearly matched. She overheard phone calls about the trust and moving assets. She watched her father grow increasingly fearful of her mother, agreeing with her decisions and never pushing back. She also saw Brooke perform for neighbors, church members, and teachers, playing the role of the devoted parent sacrificing everything for her disabled child. Then, 2 nights earlier, Nola heard something that convinced her she could no longer stay silent. She had crept to the top of the stairs, something she had done many times before, while her parents talked in the kitchen. Brooke explained that the tea would make me sick enough to land in the ER, not dangerous, but causing severe stomach pain and extreme drowsiness. I would be out of commission for days. When Jared asked what would happen to Nola while they were gone, Brooke said the neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, would take her. She had already told her that I sometimes had episodes. While I was hospitalized, they would drive to Indianapolis to meet a lawyer who didn't know me. Brooke had prepared forged paperwork to transfer the entire trust into her name. By the time I recovered, everything would be finalized, and she believed I would never be able to prove it. There was no cruise, no vacation, just a plan to poison me, fake my signature, and steal more than $1 million. My own sister. I pulled Nola into my arms and held her tightly. She had carried this burden for 5 years, watching her mother lie and manipulate everyone. When it truly mattered, she found the courage to speak. I told her she had saved my life. She hugged me back, holding on with surprising strength, and said she couldn't let her mother hurt me anymore. I looked at the thermos on the counter, ordinary, harmless looking with its yellow lid. Evidence. My tears stopped, replaced by a calm focus. Brooke thought she had 5 days to take everything. She thought I would be too sick to stop her. She was wrong. The first person I called was Gwen Mercer. We'd known each other since college. She became a nurse, I became an accountant. Different careers, same trust. She answered quickly, and when I asked her to come over immediately, she didn't hesitate. 40 minutes later, Gwen arrived, still in her scrubs. One look at me, and she pulled me into a hug. I told her everything, the tea, the plan, and Nola finally speaking to warn me. Gwen listened carefully, then knelt in front of Nola and told her she was incredibly brave. She shifted into problem-solving mode. The tea needed testing. She knew someone at the hospital lab who could run an urgent analysis. Wearing gloves she somehow had in her purse, she carefully took a sample and sealed it. She shook her head, muttering that she'd always sensed something off about Brooke. Gwen asked what other evidence we had. I turned to Nola, who said she knew where her mother kept important papers. She explained that there was a locked drawer in the home office and that she knew the code because no one ever noticed her when she was quiet. She led us to the office, a neat, staged space, and told us the code. 031 Fiend, Brooke and Jared's anniversary. The drawer opened easily. Inside were forged bank authorization forms with a near-perfect version of my signature, though the details were wrong. There were trust account statements showing repeated withdrawals under $15,000, just below reporting thresholds, totaling around $180,000. There were printed emails with an Indianapolis attorney discussing emergency asset transfers and questioning my mental fitness. And there was a file labeled with my name and supposed mental health concerns. Pages of fabricated notes describing instability and paranoia, clearly meant to discredit me if I ever objected. Gwen photographed everything and said plainly that this was deliberate fraud, planned over a long period. As I reviewed the documents, patterns emerged: dates, amounts, inconsistencies. The numbers told the story clearly. Then Gwen received a message from the lab. The tea contained a strong laxative combined with a sedative herb. Not lethal, but enough to cause severe illness and incapacitation for 2 to 3 days. Hospital-level symptoms. Exactly as Nola had warned. Brooke wasn't trying to kill me. She was too calculated for that. She only needed me incapacitated long enough to take everything. I thought about my emergency savings account, $8,000 in a separate bank, unknown to my family. Years ago, a financial advisor told me to always have walkaway money. I followed that advice quietly, never mentioning it to anyone. Now that money was going to fund my defense. Sometimes careful, boring planning is what keeps you alive. There was one more call I had to make. Kevin Calloway. We'd been in the same college study group. He went to law school while I went into accounting. Now he was an assistant prosecutor in Franklin County. I explained everything. When I finished, there was a pause before he spoke. He said plainly that this was fraud, forgery, attempted poisoning, and what Brooke had done to Nola amounted to coercive control and psychological abuse. Serious charges. When I asked what to do, he told me to let him handle the legal side. He would coordinate with local police, contact the FBI, and reach out to the Indianapolis attorney. The case crossed state lines, making it federal. He warned me Brooke couldn't know I was aware. If she suspected anything, she might disappear with whatever money she still controlled. I had to make her believe the plan was working perfectly. That meant pretending I drank the tea, pretending I was sick, pretending I was helpless while my sister drove to Indianapolis to rob me. 3 days of acting. The hardest performance of my life. I told Kevin I could do it, and I meant it. By day 2, it was time to play the role. I sat in Brooke's living room staring at my phone. Nola sat beside me, quiet but alert. Even now that she could speak, she still watched everything carefully. I called Brooke. It went straight to voicemail, exactly as expected. I left a message using a weak, shaky voice, saying I'd been sick all night, dizzy, barely able to stand, and that I might need to go to the hospital. I apologized for ruining her trip and said Mrs. Patterson could take Nola if needed. When I hung up, my hands were steady. Gwen, sitting across from me, gave me a thumbs up and said the performance was convincing. 2 hours later, Brooke replied with a text, not a call, just a short message wishing me well, saying not to worry about Nola, and ending with a pink heart emoji. She didn't ask which hospital I was in. She didn't ask to speak to her daughter. She didn't offer to come home. Gwen pointed that out immediately. The lack of concern said everything. Over the next few hours, Gwen's husband, who worked in IT, helped us track social media activity. Jared hadn't been careful. His Instagram still had location services turned on. He'd posted a photo from a coffee shop, clearly tagged in Indianapolis. No cruise, no Caribbean, exactly where Nola said they were. While Gwen followed their digital trail, I returned to the office drawer. Brooke was meticulous. I knew there had to be more. At the bottom, under old tax returns, I found handwritten letters dated during our mother's final months. They were from Brooke to our mother, written while Mom was dying of cancer. In them, Brooke demanded that the will be changed, that everything be left to her alone, that I be cut out. She argued that I was single, had fewer responsibilities, and accused Mom of favoring me. The pressure and manipulation were clear. Then I found my mother's response, written in shaky handwriting but firm words. She refused. She said she would not punish me for being responsible or reward greed. The trust would remain equal. She ended the discussion and expressed disappointment in who Brooke had become. Even at the end, my mother protected me. Brooke waited for her to die, and then began forging documents. I sat on the floor of that flawless home office, holding my mother's last words, and cried, not for myself, but for her. Nola appeared in the doorway and asked about the letters. When I told her they were from her grandmother, she sat beside me and said, Grandma once warned her to watch her mother, that something was wrong in her heart. At the time, Nola thought she meant illness. Now she understood differently. She asked if I thought Grandma knew she wasn't really mute. I thought about my mother, observant, sharp, selective about her battles, and said I believe she trusted me to figure things out and trusted Nola to be brave when it mattered. That evening, Kevin called with updates. Police were fully briefed. The FBI was involved due to interstate wire fraud. Brooke had turned this into a federal case on her own. The Indianapolis attorney, Warren Ducker, had already noticed inconsistencies in the signatures and was considering canceling the meeting. Once authorities explained the situation, he agreed to cooperate. The plan was set for day 4. When Brooke and Jared arrived expecting to complete the transfer, police would be waiting. My role was to keep pretending. So I did. Day 2, I texted that I was still sick. Day 3, I said I could barely keep water down and told her not to cut the trip short. Each message was designed to reassure her. That same day, Kevin arranged for a child advocacy specialist to take Nola's statement properly, with a psychologist present and everything recorded. Nola was nervous, sitting in a chair too big for her, but once she started speaking, she didn't stop. She told them everything: what she overheard at 3, the threats, the fear, the years of silence, and the plan about the tea. When it ended, she said her voice felt tired but good, like she could finally breathe again. When I hugged her afterward, I told her there was just one more day. She nodded. One more day. Day 4, Indianapolis, Indiana, 10:15 a.m., Warren Ducker's law office. I wasn't there in person. Kevin arranged a secure video feed so I could watch from Brooke's living room. Nola sat next to me holding my hand, with Gwen on my other side. On the screen, we saw the lobby camera as Brooke and Jared entered the building. Brooke looked flawless. Professional outfit, simple jewelry, and a carefully practiced look of concern. She carried a leather folder from her office, filled with forged paperwork and false plans. Jared looked uneasy, sweating through his shirt, his eyes scanning the room. He had always known something was wrong, but fear had kept him silent. They approached the receptionist, smiled, gave their names, and were guided down the hallway to a conference room where 3 people waited. Brooke walked in first, confident and ready to finalize what she believed would be the largest theft of her life. Warren Ducker sat at the head of the table, serious and unsmiling. 2 others sat beside him, a man and a woman in plain clothes. Brooke paused and said she thought the meeting was private, her tone polite but cautious. Ducker asked her to sit and introduced Detectives Morrison and Park, explaining they had questions about the documents she submitted. Through the feed, I watched Brooke's expression shift briefly before she regained control. She sat, composed, offering to help and asking if there was an issue with the paperwork. Morrison calmly confirmed Brooke's identity, her relationship to me, and her role as co-trustee. Brooke answered smoothly, still believing she could manage the situation. Morrison then placed 2 signatures side by side, one forged, one real, and asked Brooke to explain the difference. For a moment, panic showed. Then Brooke claimed my handwriting was inconsistent and suggested I was mentally unstable. Detective Park responded that they had reviewed those claims. My employer described me as highly detail-oriented. My doctor confirmed my health. Colleagues vouched for my stability. Morrison added that bank records showed $180,000 in unauthorized withdrawals, emails documented plans to transfer trust assets, forensic analysis confirmed forgery, and lab tests identified sedatives and laxatives in the tea, enough to hospitalize someone for days. Jared made a strained sound. Brooke went silent, her expression hardening. Morrison then played a recording. Nola's voice filled the room, clear and steady, explaining how she was threatened into silence at 3 years old to protect me, how she stayed quiet for 5 years, and what she overheard before the supposed cruise. The recording ended. Brooke insisted it was fabricated, repeating that Nola was mute. Morrison gently pointed out that Brooke had just admitted believing her daughter couldn't speak, while real medical records showed selective mutism caused by fear and trauma. She explained that Brooke had psychologically abused her child for years, adding to the list of serious crimes. Brooke's composure collapsed. Jared tried to stop her, then turned to the detectives and asked for a lawyer, offering full cooperation. He admitted Brooke planned everything and said he was afraid of her. Brooke lashed out at him. Detective Park stood and placed her under arrest. Through the video, I watched as my sister was led away, still talking, still trying to justify herself. I felt Nola squeeze my hand and whisper that it was over. Gwen made a dry comment about returning the Mother of the Year plaque. I didn't laugh, but I felt something settle. Justice was finally moving. 2 weeks later, we were in Franklin County Family Court. The room was small and practical, nothing like a courtroom drama, but something important was happening there. I sat at the front table in a professional outfit, with Nola beside me in a purple dress she chose herself. She was nervous, but no longer silent. The judge reviewed the case: Brooke's arrest, the fraud, the forgery, the attempted poisoning, and 5 years of psychological abuse. Jared had given up his parental rights in exchange for cooperation. The judge looked at Nola directly and acknowledged the courage it took for her to speak again after years of silence. Nola nodded, still gripping my hand so tightly my fingers were starting to numb. The judge leaned forward and spoke gently, asking her directly, in her own words, where she wanted to live. Nola looked at me, then at the judge, then back at me, and slowly stood up. She was 8 years old, barely 4 feet tall, wearing a purple dress, and showing more courage than most adults ever manage. She said she wanted to live with her Aunt Lisa. Her voice was clear and steady, the same voice she had given up for 5 years to protect someone she loved. She explained that I was the only one who truly saw her. Even when she couldn't speak, I listened. I read to her, sat with her, and never made her feel like something was wrong with her. After a brief pause, she added that I also made really good pancakes. Soft laughter moved through the courtroom, and even the judge smiled before signing the order. Emergency custody was granted to Lisa Raines. As we left the courthouse, I couldn't stop looking at Nola. She talked nonstop about the courtroom, lunch ideas, a bird she spotted on a ledge, and whether we could get a dog someday. 5 years of silence had turned into a flood of words, and I welcomed every one of them. That evening, we had dinner in my apartment, our apartment. I had already begun turning the spare room into her bedroom, with purple walls she chose herself, shelves full of books, and a small reading corner by the window. During dinner, she asked if she could tell me about dinosaurs. I said yes, and she launched into a long explanation covering every species she'd ever read about, including which ones would win fights and why movies had it all wrong. I listened carefully. Understanding every detail didn't matter. Listening did. Nola started therapy the next week with a specialist in childhood trauma. It wasn't easy. Years of fear don't disappear quickly. Some days were quiet and difficult, but there were many good days too. Days filled with laughter, singing, and stories from school about new friends who only knew her as Nola. Brooke faced multiple felony charges, and the evidence left little room for defense. She accepted a plea deal. I didn't attend the hearings. My focus was elsewhere. The trust was frozen, audited, and most of the stolen money was recovered. I became the sole trustee and managed it carefully for our future. I sold the family home and set up an education fund for Nola, placing the rest into savings. Sometimes I think about my mother and the letter she wrote, standing firm even at the end, and the warning she quietly gave her granddaughter. She saw the truth and protected the people who needed it most. I hope she'd be proud. Last Saturday morning, Nola and I had breakfast on my balcony. Pancakes, orange juice, and early autumn sunlight. She told me about a dream involving a penguin who could drive, a castle made of waffles, and a very polite dragon. It made no sense at all, and it was perfect. I listened, really listened. This is what family is meant to sound like. Not silence or fear, but shared moments and open voices. Nola paused, thanked me for listening even when she couldn't talk, and I squeezed her hand and promised I always would. Some of the quietest people aren't weak. They're waiting for someone they trust. Nola found her voice, and I found my family. Our story wasn't ending. It was just beginning.